to you to ask us, and we would love to do whatever we can to help you out. For those of you that don't know us, we are the job placement department. So the final part of the boot camp is job placement. So if you don't know us now, you will be getting to know us later in the future, and we look forward to that. And anyway, so this is completely open forum. I want everybody to participate and learn something. And if they have any questions, no question is too small or too big. We would really like to do anything we can to help you feel more comfortable and prepared for the interview process, the job search, and the road ahead of you. So I'll open up the floor up now if anybody has any immediate questions they'd like to jump off with. Oh, and I guess if you don't have a camera, feel free to just shout out at me and I'll call you out.
Yeah.
If not, I can start doing some sample questions, some typical topics that people tend to struggle with.
If attendees do want to ask questions, you can go ahead and unmute your mic below, and you're welcome to ask any questions anytime.
All right, let's see here.
So I think one of the questions that was asked is, what are some common questions that are asked during an interview? It usually starts off with, tell us a little bit about yourself. And then, so I know that sounds like a very straightforward question, but sometimes it stumps people because you wonder to yourself, well, what is there? What makes me me? Who am I? There's a little bit of a strategy behind answering this question. The strategy is, well, you tell a little bit about your background. So for example, if you were a graduate of a university, you could say, I was a graduate at, let's say, State, or I'm a graduate of the Tech Academy. I studied the full stack software development bootcamp, where I went through and did front end development, studied back end development, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, SQL, Python, C#. I've built up these kinds of projects. I'm very interested in C#, .NET development, and that's what brings me here, for example. So, like in a nutshell, you're talking about your past experience, what you've accumulated from that experience, and how it relates to the job that you were applying to. So you're not necessarily going all over the place by saying, you could add like, oh, I'm a dog lover too, just to kind of soften it a little bit. But you don't want to go too far into being like a Star Trek nerd and talking about that and stuff like that. But unless you know that the hiring manager is really into that kind of stuff too, that might work a little bit. So that is one of the questions. Another question is, for example, tell me about your professional strengths, your coding strengths, or tell me about, give me a time where you excelled in a team. And those are just kind of general interview questions. I'm not talking about a technical interview that sometimes comes later, after they get to know you a little bit, to see if they even want to give you a technical interview. So that is, I hope that answers that question. Maybe if the person who asked that question can give me if that was helpful or not.
I think something we want to, go for it, Michelle, first. Sorry.
You just need to unmute.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sufficient. Thank you. Well, I actually guess on top of that, what is a common question, since I've been on many interviews before, but not for software development or web design. So what is a common question for a junior role that is technical?
So they want to know what kind of projects you've worked on. What things have you worked on? How have you developed your skills being a junior developer? Does that help answer your question, Michelle? You can keep your mic on. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I just I'm used to Zoom. It's a little different. Yeah, so just I know, so with it being a junior, they wouldn't ask you, I've read and heard about being asked to write a program, and just, of course, something simple and short, but would they ask that for a junior applicant?
Yeah, absolutely. And the main thing that they're looking for is to see your thinking process, and you can write it in pseudocode. So you don't necessarily have to be spot on, because I think that a concern that a lot of students have when I'm working with them in terms of conducting a mock interview, a technical mock interview, is they're concerned with having the perfect answer. And that's not what a hiring manager might be looking for. What we're looking for is somebody who is able to be given a problem and be able to break down that problem in a way that shows that they can use their critical thinking skills, take the experience that they've accumulated coming from the Tech Academy, and then applying that to this problem that has been presented to them. So that is the main thing that you are trying to express or show that you're capable of doing in a technical interview at a junior level. Is that helpful?
Another thing to point
Yes,
out here, is that a lot of these soft skills questions are going to be very similar to what you've seen on a previous interview, non-tech related. Typically, your first interview is going to be, they want to get to know you a little bit. They're not going to jump first interview, okay, code this program for me real quick. That's very rarely going to happen. It's typically, they're going to get to know you a little bit. They're going to ask you to tell you a little bit about yourself, about your strengths, about your weaknesses, just like Tony had mentioned. And one thing to think about when answering these kind of questions is that you are applying for, say, a front end or a back end or some sort of development career. You want to answer with the mindset of, how can I bring this back around to be relevant about software development? So say you talk about your strengths or your weaknesses, how can you bring that back around to be relevant to the career that you are applying to? Or if they ask you about your previous experience, if you don't have exactly the experience they're looking for, how can you talk about how that's relevant, how that management experience, that teamwork is relevant to working in part of this development environment? Does that make sense? Is that closer to, is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Of course, okay. So let's see, we got Christopher Moody asks, as someone coming from the hospitality field, how much, if any, of your prior background would you present on your LinkedIn? Which is a great question. Tony, do you have a suggestion for what kind of experience should be included on your LinkedIn that's not tech related?
So I've spoken to a few different recruiters who have expressed to me that all of your past experience is relevant experience. And the reason why is because you shouldn't dismiss, let's say you're working in the hospitality industry, and there are skills there are skills that are translatable into the software development industry. One of them is being able to communicate and articulate and work well with people, right? That's important when you're working on a team, especially in software development. You're required to sometimes do code peer reviews, or you're required to be able to articulate your code and why you did what you ended up doing to someone else. So if you're the only thing that I would maybe say that if to caution on is if your experience is so far like 10 years ago, right? And then you have big gaps in your experience, that might be something that you might want to, when it comes time to talk to us about, let us help you and review your resume to see if that is something worthwhile putting onto your resume. So if that time comes, we are more than happy to look over your resume and help you out with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, gaps is a big one. You don't want to have 5 years totally unexplained. What were you doing in these 5 years? And there's ways to get around how to fill in those gaps or how to make it look like there's less of a gap. And yeah, we would love to help you out individually on that when the time comes. All right. Who else has a question?
Forrest, quick question.
Yeah.
Well, what are the typical steps of going through the interview process? So you submitted your application, they want to interview you. How many interviews are there typically? And how does that process work?
Great question. Yeah. So it varies pretty wildly. You know, a very common thing is that you'll get a phone screen of some sort. They're going to call you and they're looking to check, A, are you a human? Are you not just some robot that applied? Are you a likable person? Do they want to move forward with the interview because you have good personal skills? And these phone screens can be quick and they're not going to go too in depth. And they don't always happen, but this is something to look forward to. Then you move on to your like more in-depth soft skills interview. And right now that's going to be typically over the phone. Sometimes I see them over a Google Meet or a Zoom call or what have you. And that's going to be, like we had mentioned earlier, like, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me about your programming experience. They're not going to go too deep into, okay, solve this algorithm or this or that, but they are going to ask questions like, why do you want to work for this company? If it's a nonprofit, like, what about nonprofits attracts you? Why do you want to work for a company that does, you know, blank? So it's really valuable at this time to have done your research about the company before you go into these interviews. Find out what they build, find out their clientele, find out the work environment. You know, you can learn a lot just from a company's website, and you can kind of get an idea of the general tone of that company and bring a different sort of mentality to the interview, whether that be more fun and lighthearted or more professional and business-like. So it's really important to do your research ahead of time. Then if they like you there, typically you'll move forward into, they'll either, you know, bump you up to like a technical recruiter or maybe to a CTO or somebody in the actual technical office or the technical administration part of the business. And that's where you're going to see things like coding challenges and assessments. Sometimes they send you an assessment over an email and you have 40 minutes once you click start. And it's like, here's 10 questions with the final one being a coding challenge. You've got 40 minutes to complete it. They're not all like that, but those are common ones that I see. A good thing to think about when going through those is you want to be able to don't back out of it and quit and say, oh, I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't answer all of them, so I don't want to do it. You can show your work, and even if you can't reach the perfect answer, if you can show your work and show your thought process, that's hugely valuable. Just like Tony said, pseudocode is totally fine in these circumstances. They're not looking for the perfect programmer because no one's going to be perfect the first time. Just show that you understand the process. And so, you know, you look at these assessments, sometimes it'll be a live, you know, like we're doing now, coding assessment where you're actually coding in front of somebody. It varies. And then that could be the end of the process. After that, they could move you right to the hiring process. I've seen application processes go about 6 or 7 interviews deep before a person is hired. Typically, the further you get into it, the higher your chances of landing the job. But I've seen it go, you know, hired on the first interview and then hired on the 6th or 7th interview. It kind of varies, but that's the typical pattern you're looking for. Soft skills, you know, screen call, soft skills, technical skills. And then very often you'll get some sort of like, okay, do you mesh well with our team? We're going to bring you in and introduce you to the team. Does the team like you? Are you going to fit in well with our environment? You know, that's kind of the last process that I've seen pretty frequently these days. Good question, Rick. All right, let's see. We have a couple more in the chat here. This one from David Freiling. Do you recommend putting coding projects on your resume? I would say absolutely. Tony, do you want to go into depth as to why that's important?
Sure, absolutely. Whatever job that you are applying to, let's say it's a JavaScript, React, or .NET C#, they want to see if you have projects relevant to what they're hiring for, right? And if not, have you worked on projects that you will end up being trainable, that they can onboard you fairly quickly? And so it's definitely highly encouraged to put the projects that you've worked on into your resume. And it doesn't need to be like this huge thing on one project that you did, but you need to be able to give the title, what the project does, what you did on the project, and then maybe give a link or something like that that goes over to your GitHub that shows the project. So yes, it's definitely highly encouraged to put projects that you've worked on in your resume. If projects aren't on the resume, I always encourage the students that I work with to get a few projects that they've worked on and highlight those.
Yeah, it's more valuable to have typical like actual experience in terms of projects in your resume than it is to have fluff. If you have a really long summary talking about yourself, but no room for projects, like get rid of the summary, put in those projects. You only want relevant. They're going through 100 resumes in a day, maybe. They're not going to look for, oh, he's a very nice, passionate person. These are all nice things I have in there, but they want to see what kind of projects. Oh, cool, he's built some JavaScript stuff. So, oh, that's great, that's relevant. Cool, put him at the top of the stack. They want to.
Much rather have projects than a summary. Exactly. So many people say that they're detail oriented in their summary, right? Works well with the team. Yeah, detail oriented. Those kinds of things. Those are so common. I mean, out of 10 resumes that I get from students, I'd say 9 of them include those things. So that doesn't set you apart. You want to do things that set you apart. And what sets you apart are your projects that you've worked on.
I call that referred to as deadwood. As I was reading this morning, it's unnecessary fluff that doesn't add anything to the resume. It's just so typical and common that it might as well be not there. Just that extra.
Exactly.
Thank you. Do you guys find in your experiences that they actually click on those links sometimes and check some of that stuff out? I just kind of wondered if that early in the process they looked at that.
I've been in interviews where they actually have. Maybe not before they bring you in for an interview, but while you're in the interview, other people, I mean, the person who brought you into the interview may have checked it beforehand, but then the people during the interview, while they're interviewing, you might be interviewing with 3 or 4 people, and they'll click on those links and they'll say, "Oh, I see you worked on this, React or this JavaScript project or the C# project. Can you tell me a little bit about it?" And as you're talking about, they're reading it, or they're looking through it, and so yes, definitely.
Yeah, I've even seen, kind of back to that previous interview process, I've seen an interview process where they want you to talk about your projects. They pull a project. Anything off your GitHub is fair game. That's something really important to think about. And we talk about that during job placement. And sometimes we'll do a practice where we say, okay, give me 2 projects off your GitHub. I'm going to study up on them, and then I'm going to quiz the heck out of you on it. So it's very common that they'll say, okay, well, tell me all about this project you built. So if it's on your resume, make sure you're familiar with it. Make sure you know the ins and outs, the languages, the frameworks. Maybe you can talk fluently and passionately about it. That way, it's not just, oh, I built a thing with this. You want to be able to go in depth and practice talking about it. So before an interview, go over the stuff that you have on your resume. Make sure that you're fluent, very fluent in it.
Yes, anything on your resume is fair game. Anything that you put on there is fair game as an interview question.
Absolutely.
Can we use our since our portfolio website is so heavy with JavaScript, which is a huge language almost in every application today, is that fair game as well to list as a project?
Yeah.
It is a custom built portfolio website. So just out of curiosity.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. I would say if you have any personal projects that you worked on outside of the school, list those first. List the things that you're they want to see that. Obviously, having any sort of project on there is going to help. But if you have passion projects, if you have something you're working on that you're passionate about, for instance, Scott, who just spoke there, built a video game website, this really awesome website that he spent all this time on. That's first on his resume because that's the thing that he's passionate about. He's the most fluent in it. So if they ask him about it, he knows every in and out of it. And it shows that he's actively coding outside of the normal, school assignments and all that jazz. All right, let's see. Going down the list here. Joseph Ladd asks, with respects to holes in employment, what are some common biases that you experience as a hiring manager? Meaning, what are you looking to suss out from an applicant, and what are the explanations we're looking for? So in terms of holes, so basically you don't want to have any holes in your experience in your resume. If you do, there's ways to get around it. Say, I was taking care of a family member, or I was, if you can add it to, if it's educational, if there's any, if maybe you were out of a job for 2 years because you were pursuing some sort of higher education, absolutely include that on there. That'll fill the hole. It kind of is on a person by person basis in terms of what that looks like. So if that's why we come in to help you build this resume to eliminate those sort of holes. If they don't see the holes, they're not going to ask you about them necessarily. So that's kind of the step one. But I've definitely seen, a hole in an application where they didn't want to fill it in with something, but it turns out they were taking care of a family member. And then during the interview process, they were able to explain that, and it kind of alleviated the situation. Like, well, where were you for this year? Like, oh, I had this really important family member I was taking care of because yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, in terms of explanations, it's really kind of on a person by person basis. And if Joseph, have these holes that you want to talk about, we can absolutely one-on-one discuss like the best ways to approach an interview and writing a resume based on your exact situation. Is that helpful? I can't see everybody on my screen, so feel free to yell at me if I'm. All right. Going on down here. Bootcamp also. So someone asked, I'm going to be 58 when I finish the bootcamp. Also, I live in a smaller community. Will I have a harder time finding a job? Tony, do you want to take this one?
From what I've experienced, there's not much discrimination in terms of
froze up a little bit.
age and where you live, especially in terms of, a lot of jobs remote days. A lot of software development jobs are remote. People are working from home. If you have the skills, for example, if you are a carpenter and you have the capacity and the ability to build great furniture, somebody's looking for someone to build furniture. They're not going to discriminate you based off how old you are or where you live, right? And if you can provide that product to them. So if you're able to communicate your skills in a certain way that shows that you're going to be valuable in this role, their age is not going to be a problem. Can you do the job is the problem. That's what I love so much about software development, is because you can't BS your way into the role. You either know how to do it or you don't. You're in an interview. Once you get to that point, they're going to turn the laptop around to you and say, okay, all the things that you said that you can do, please show me that you're capable of doing it. And if you're capable of doing that, once you get to that interview stage, then there's age is not a problem. Location isn't a problem really these days because of, like I said, remote work. So I hope that answers your question.
Let's see. Going down the list here, somebody asked, how do virtual job fairs typically play out, and are they worthwhile? Are they a worthwhile endeavor? I would say any networking opportunity, any avenue that you could possibly explore that could lead to some sort of connection or job is worthwhile, no matter what that is. We tell our people, our students, go through your Facebook friends, go through your Instagram friends, and tell all of them that you're a software developer looking for work, and talk about all these opportunities. Like any possible thing you can do to get yourself out there is worthwhile. In terms of job fairs specifically, I've had several students attend job fairs, specifically in Seattle and somewhere on the East Coast. They're all over the place, so they're absolutely something to look out for. And that was one thing I was going to bring up, was different sort of networking events outside of your typical meetups. But it doesn't go great. Maybe you don't make any connections, whatever. Experience working with video chat. You got experience doing this, that, or the other. It's any sort of valuable experience in the job industry is very valuable. I've seen job fairs that are just like a message board, and those are they're whatever, you get a connection out of it. One of my graduates the other day went to a job fair that was, it was like Sims. I don't know if you guys know what Sims is, but it was every person was like a little character in a booth, and you would walk around and actually go to the different booths as this little virtual character and speak with people in a video chat. And it was kind of a whole fun, different experience. So they vary pretty wildly. Either way, it's an opportunity, and that's what it's all about. So, take these opportunities. If they pop up, absolutely look into them. Especially sometimes they cost money, sometimes they're pretty inexpensive, sometimes they're free. So you got to weigh whether or not it's worth the cost to you. But I haven't seen them cost more than $7 to $10. So usually it's pretty worth it, in my opinion. Isaac, did that kind of answer your question? Was that what you were looking for? Hopefully you can hear me. Okay, beautiful. Awesome. All right, that's all the questions in the chat. Who else has something they're curious about?
Forrest and or Tony, I'm curious about
Sure.
knowledge-based questions. So I know we have received like the Quizzy website, right? And I've been going through flashcards. Are there any other really good resources for knowledge-based questions? Because those are some of them. That's one of the most broadest subjects that I feel like, is the largest pool for an interview to pull out of. So I know obviously you can focus on the technologies the company's using and study up on those specific technologies, but is there any good resources to actually use to study with those besides Quizzy, that is?
I'm sorry, maybe you could
Yeah, I mean, there's
elaborate a little bit more on what were you saying? Knowledge-based questions?
Yeah, so like if maybe you get to the point of a technical phone interview and a recruiter or an engineer says, "What's a closure in JavaScript?" So so those type of questions I've been reading on boards and seeing a lot of people get tripped up with knowledge-based questions. And when I self-reflect and say, if I was asked these questions, kind of like the questions Forrest posts or that I've seen posted in the emails for the weekly roundtable, things like that. Are there any
Oh,
good resources online or almost like a leak code is for algorithms and data structures? Is there a knowledge-based resource specifically that I could use to really hone my skills there?
well, what I typically recommend to the students I work with is number one, there's like Full Stack Cafe. And in Full Stack Cafe, if you just Google Full Stack Cafe, it'll come up with, a big list of questions depending on if you want to study C#, JavaScript, or SQL, or whatever it is, right? And then you just click on it. And then it'll have a list of different questions that may be asked in a typical interview. And when the students that I work with, when we do our mock interviews, I tap from that Full Stack Cafe, and then I ask questions from that. I don't know if you've already visited Full Stack Cafe or not, but that's what I typically used.
No, yeah, I have not. So something like that is exactly what I'd be looking for.
Yeah, I don't know. And Forrest might have some other resources. I don't know. Do you, Forrest?
Yeah, I mean, there's dozens and dozens of good resources out there for these type of questions. I gather all the questions for the roundtables. For those of you that don't know, Tony and I, every Wednesday, we hold a weekly technical skills roundtable where we talk about interview questions, both soft skills and technical skills, and we also give out coding challenges. So if anybody's interested, please, contact me afterwards. I send out an email every week about it, but I'd love to have more of you on that. But I'm searching for new technical questions every single week. So I find dozens and dozens of resources for interview-based questions, like common interview questions, skills that you should know before you go into an interview for Python, JavaScript, C#, everything. Full Stack Cafe is great because you can narrow it down to the particular language or framework or skill that you're using. And they have hundreds of questions based on each one. But also simply Googling, common Python interview questions, and you'll find like hundreds of resources that are specific to Python, that's stuff that you need to know before you go into an interview. Very common questions based on other people going in interviews. This is what they bring out of it. And that's why it's also a good idea to go, when you go into these interviews, to take note of every single question you were asked. If you're going into a technical interview and you feel like you bombed it, make sure you write down every single question you were asked if you can memorize it, because chances are you're going to be asked those again, and they're going to be common. And if we can help you practice for that, if we can help find you the resources for that, that's going to be super valuable. So that's why it's always good to have a notebook when you go to an interview. Write everything down that you're being asked. In terms of coding challenges, I really like edibit.com. I'll write it in the chat here. Edibit's a great place for coding challenges. Code Hacker, I think, is one, or Hacker Code. There's like an unrealistic, there's just an infinite supply of like coding challenges out there that really help the thought process of coding, and not only help you practice coding, but also help you like, oh, you got to research all these topics, and then in the end you end up learning a lot more about JavaScript because you had to spend 30 minutes researching about it. So I hope that helps, Scott. I have a ton more resources I can give you in person after this, but I can't get them off the top of my head here.
Yeah, no, that'd
Is that
be great.
helpful?
It does help, that and the Full Stack Cafe. I'll absolutely look into that. And Karen, the Quizzy website, it's I think it's QUISSES or something like that. It's actually given in the job placement course. So it's definitely something Forrest or Tony, whoever your job placement director, will give you. It's a great website. I was just looking for even more. That's all. And Forrest, I would appreciate it. I'm just, I know if you Google it, yes, there are tons of them, but I value your guys' input. So I was just curious as to what you guys may be using for those things. So that really,
I say Full Stack Cafe is, yeah, Full Stack Cafe is where we pull a lot from because it's pretty fast, and there's specifically one that we like to use. It's like 50 front end developer questions that you must know or something like that, and I can send you the link to that. And that's, if you do a mock interview with us, that's typically where we start because it has it's a pretty broad variety of topics, and it's stuff that's covered in the boot camp, so it's stuff that you definitely would already know. But I would love to, and part of the job process is doing these mock interviews. So we do one-on-one mock interviews for those of you who don't know, and by request or by without anybody who wants to do mock interviews one-on-one, we would absolutely love to do that.
Yeah, I would encourage the graduates who haven't set up mock interviews with us to definitely do that. It's definitely helpful and useful because the more practice you get, the better you will be during the actual interview. And we're more than happy to help you guys. So definitely reach out to us and set up an appointment if you haven't already done so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can I add something, Forrest? There's a book called Cracking the Coding.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Forrest, there's a book called Cracking the Coding Interview. It's one of the most well-known and famous books for tech interviews. I'll put a link in the chat for it, but it's really good for just different questions that are going to be asked when you're in the interview.
Funny you said that. I ordered the book yesterday. I think I told Forrest.
Okay.
Yeah.
I literally ordered it yesterday. So
yeah, well, it can be a little intimidating because it's like this big, this thick.
I have it in my office.
You just want to work through it little by little. I mean, they're good for coding challenges, definitely. But it can be a little intimidating when you first get it. So just take small bites.
Keep that in mind.
Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
All right. Who else has any questions? It could be about anything on the job process: resumes, cover letters, interviews, where to search, what to search for, anything at all. We'd love to help you out.
Well, how do you find it with doing remote work, Forrest?
Okay.
How is it with remote jobs with the current times?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Can you hear me?
I personally work with. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, it's cutting out a little bit. I'm gonna hold on one sec. I'm gonna.
I think Forrest will be right back.
Well, while Forrest is doing that, as far as remote work, what we can speak on personally is I'm working from my house right now, and Forrest is working in the office. Everything that we do, I mean, email communication, we have Zoom calls, Google Meets, we have our phone calls, text message. So with technology, there's not much that we cannot do. In a software development environment, you might have a VPN that you're working through, and you're committing code through, I don't know, TFS, Team Foundation Server or something like that, and you're pushing your code. So there's definitely ability to work from home. It might not be as ideal as working in an office, because when you have questions, you can't just poke your head over the, I don't know, cubicle or whatever and ask a question. Sometimes it's a little bit of a time delay, but it's nothing that is such a detriment to your daily work that it can't be done. Hope that answers your question.
All right. And Tony, we do have another question in the chat. It says, can you guys talk about the personal experiences with finding programming jobs?
My personal experience is that so for example, once you get into job placement, you're asked to apply for 35 to 35 different companies in order to graduate or in order to meet that requirement in job placement. And even though you might think that that's a lot of companies, we've had students, I've done this myself, who applied to over 100 different jobs, 100 different companies, sent out 100 different applications, 200 applications. And it isn't until they get to their 100th application that they start getting, a lot of interview requests or any kind of responses, really, right? But we've also had students who send out one application and they get a job after that one application, right? So it really depends. It really depends. So I hope that answers your question.
I just have a quick question. When I'm
I wanted
looking
to,
local,
unless that was already answered, I wanted to come back to the remote.
No, I answered.
No, go ahead. Please go ahead.
I was just going to ask.
Okay, perfect. Thank
I've
you.
been looking locally, and most of the jobs that I see in my area are saying that they want like 5 to 7 years of experience. They're not really looking for junior. Once I get out of this boot camp, should I just go ahead and apply in those places anyway, just in case they have something open up?
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, and
Okay,
the reason why I say that is because we've seen job recs that required, what was it, like, I think Sam was saying 10 to 15 years of HTML, CSS, JavaScript experience for a junior level developer. Now that's just outrageous, right? Like, who's gonna take that job, a junior level pay 10, 15 years of experience, right? For a front-end developer. So these job recs are written maybe by just someone in the HR department who doesn't have a lot of, prior experience with hiring front-end developers. So the job rec that you see, I would definitely encourage you. I even tell the students I work with, if it says mid-level, apply for those as well, because like you said, there might be an opportunity that if you don't fit that mid-level or senior level experience, they might know something that might match your skills a little better and still reach out to you. So definitely apply to those jobs. A huge thing that a lot of students have is they see a job rec and then they say, they think to themselves, oh man, I don't meet those minimum requirements, right? And that deters them from applying to so many different jobs, and it's just wasted opportunities, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Like a job posting is like a wish list for their most ideal, perfect. Like Tony had mentioned, 15 years for a junior developer. I was reading earlier, after Apple came out with the Swift programming language, about a week later, there was job postings for Swift 5 years required, and the language had been out for 2 weeks. So don't pay attention to the years required. That's typically like bogus. It's not accurate. Apply to everything, like everything. If you don't apply to anything with 5 years experience, you're not going to apply to anything, because most postings that I see have a minimum of like 2 to 5 years. And a lot of you coming out of this bootcamp don't have 2 to 5 years, and that's typical. And we still see students every single week landing jobs with the exact same experience level as anybody that comes out of this bootcamp. So, and they're applying to these 5 to 10 year jobs, and they're absolutely landing them. So don't let that scare you off, because it is not a real requirement.
In that same vein, what about college degree? So, I mean, you might have some college or no college. If it says bachelor's or master's or PhD required, still apply?
Yep.
Or if it doesn't say required only, what would you say on that?
I would still apply.
Okay.
When in doubt, apply. Yeah, I would say seasoned developers will tell you apply to literally everything you can. Say you apply to a position that says, okay, PhD required 10 years of programming, and they look at your resume and they say, oh, he's got a year and a half. Well, he's not qualified for this, but hey, you know, now that I think about it, I've got a junior level position that's opening up pretty soon. Let's put him on that stack. And nobody else has applied for that job because it doesn't exist yet. So all of a sudden, you're the only candidate for this junior level position that just opened up because you applied to this position that was way higher than you. So apply to everything. Don't be scared off by the level. I mean, you can literally, we say just go for 10 applications a day. I've seen people do 50 applications a day and they land jobs quickly because they're just rushing through applications. And it really makes a difference to just go really, really hard into it and just apply to every single job you can.
This is a situation
Which
where the
seems
brute
but it
force
actually is.
method actually makes sense. So.
It's true.
Yeah, as long as you're sending out a quality resume, and that's where we come in. We want to help you. You know, don't start sending out hundreds of resumes if you're not confident in it. Pass it by us. Even if you're early in the development, even in the boot camp. Say some of you are in HTML, CSS, you want to start applying now. Send us your resumes. Like I would happily look over your resumes to make sure that they're ready to send out, because you want to make sure you're sending out something that's going to get a response. But once you're ready, just go crazy with it. Let's see here. Got a couple questions here. We got one that says, are cover letters important? If so, do you recommend custom? Yeah, cover letters are important. Absolutely. I've read kind of both sides of the spectrum. I've read some senior kind of hiring managers say if they don't require it, it's not worth doing. And I've heard some others say that it's worth doing for every single one. I personally recommend writing cover letters for every application that you can. I think that it's valuable, and customizing it is also very valuable. You don't want to bore them with your cover letter, and you don't want to restate data that's already on your resume because they don't want to read the same resume twice. So important things to have on there is obviously the job you're applying to, but why are you applying to it? What makes you qualified for that position, and why that company? Like what they want to know that you want to work for them, not that you want to work for anybody. So you want to point out aspects of that company that caught your interest, even if they didn't immediately catch your interest. Say you're just randomly applying, research the company, go on their website, find out what they do, certain kind of tech that you think is interesting. Bring that up in the cover letter and talk about why that's relevant to what your experience is, and then also talk about, you know, a past event in your life or story or some sort of experience you have that's relevant to that position. It doesn't have to be, if this is your first software development position, you don't have a ton of history with software development, but you have, say, managerial experience or teamwork experience or something else that you can tie back into software development into that particular business. Tony, do you have more tips on writing a good cover letter? Or an opinion on whether or not it's necessary?
The main points of writing a successful cover letter. As far as the importance of it, yeah, I would agree with you, Forrest. Personally, I've only written a cover letter if it states that they do actually read it. But that's just me. But with that being said, I do encourage, because of all of our students, to write cover letters, only because you don't know who's gonna be interested and who's not. So I'd rather cover my bases rather than not.
Yeah, it's not going to hurt you to write a cover letter. It's going to hurt you possibly to not write a cover letter, but exactly. It can't hurt you to write it. Just like it can't hurt you to apply to places that you think you're not qualified for. The worst thing that happens is throw it away, move on to the next one. Good thing you applied to 100 places this week because you have lots of backups. Any other questions we have? I wanted to talk about, if nobody else had any questions, I wanted to talk about networking and the importance of making quality connections with people in the industry. A lot of folks don't quite see the relevancy of LinkedIn and see how valuable it is, but like 99% of recruiters use LinkedIn as their main source of finding employees. And if your LinkedIn is linked on your resume, there's about 100% chance that someone's going to look at your LinkedIn and they're going to compare your LinkedIn to your resume to see if the data is succinct. So having the same information on your resume and your LinkedIn is really important. That's something a couple of recruiters have told me directly, is make sure that your resume and your LinkedIn are the same, because if you have contradicting data on there, then they're going to say, well, who is this person? Are they lying on the resume? Are they lying on their LinkedIn? Like, maybe we don't want to interview them. Also, after you apply, like I'm stressing this so much these days because it is so important. Following up is vital in landing a job. Calling, emailing, finding somebody on LinkedIn, doing whatever you can. You ask anybody that's like working in the industry, like I guarantee there's going to be at least 75% of the people are going to say, I followed up and that's why I got this job. I called them and I said, hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm really excited about your company. I'd love a chance to connect with somebody in the hiring department or somebody in the technical department. I just really want to talk to somebody. I'm really excited about it. And just because of that, they got an interview because they were one of 100 people that applied, but the only person that like put that extra effort in. That extra effort goes such a far ways, and it's just incredibly valuable to follow up. You can also find people on LinkedIn and send them meaningful connections. Say, I'd love to talk about C# with you. I noticed that you work here and I'm really interested in that company. Would you like to connect with me? Something, whatever, like that. Make it personal. Make it entice some sort of reaction out of it, not just connect, but hey, like, let's connect and actually talk. And I want to make these relationships, because it's vital in this industry to have a network of people in the industry to make these connections, because that's a huge opportunities you're missing out on because you just don't know the right people. And the same thing goes for, I'm rambling a little bit here, but the same thing goes for meetups and networking events. If you go to these networking events and these meetups, talk to people, talk about, it doesn't matter that you're not experienced and you don't know everything about React or C# or whatever. Just talk about that. Talk about how you're new and you're really excited and you're looking to make connections and you want to develop these relationships so that you can find opportunities, because people are generally really nice and they want to talk to you and they want to teach you. If they're doing meetups about something, then they're there to teach somebody about something. So don't be shy. I've had students that got jobs just for meetups, just from talking to somebody at a meetup more than once and reoccurring, going to that meetup every time. And they're like, hey, I got an opportunity that you might be into. And then boom, job. So networking is important. It really, really is. And we can help you out with that here at the Job Placement Department.
Hey, I wanted to jump in really quick right there. I believe it.
All right. Absolutely.
A couple of weeks ago at a Wednesday roundtable, someone had brought up that there wasn't really a tool for us to use in the school to interact with other students and to network with amongst ourselves. And I think it was like brought up, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. But is that something that could actually become a reality? Like even like just a messenger thing connected with our school page, so we can, like, if we're having issues with something, or if we just want to like talk about what we're learning, like having a space for students, the Tech Academy, to communicate with each other.
I think that's valuable, Tony. I think you might have a better idea of how possible that is and like what we can do to move forward in that.
I think it's a great idea, and our students always give us great feedback on things that can improve the program, and that's a great idea, especially during this time of COVID and where everybody's working remotely. It's difficult, or you can't even go in Portland, you can't even come in on campus and interact with other students in the conventional way that we've been used to. And so, yeah, that's a great idea, worth bringing up to people who are involved with developing the LMS. So yes, definitely. Thank you, Jesse, for bringing that up. I will definitely make note of that and pass it on to the people that who might be able to help with that.
Can I say something?
Yeah, that's also kind of why we're doing events like this, and that's why we started doing the roundtable again. Oh, absolutely. Go for it, Terry. Larry?
Yeah, because I think there used to be
Go
like
ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, it's okay. I need to work on it too, because I've been told I'm a little too soft spoken, and even doing something like this, it it kind of makes me nervous. So I'm kind of glad that you held this kind of Q&A. I think there used to be like a Slack channel. It used to be pretty active. To kind of just uh, talk about what we're learning and possibly any job or um, any kind of networking opportunities. Uh, this was before the pandemic, so I kind of missed that. Is
Yeah. Okay.
maybe if that's something you could possibly bring back, like you did with the roundtables, that would be nice.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Great idea.
Yes, definitely will be something we're
I like that idea a
looking
lot.
into starting.
And I would like to do more. Great. Yeah, I think doing more events like this is valuable. Having just this open discussion where it's not just us talking at you, and that's the whole point of the roundtables and stuff like this, because this is a networking event in a way, and we can, if this is helping Discord, you just mentioned, would also be great. But I would love to do more things like this. If you guys value this kind of experience, we would absolutely continue doing events just like this, where we open it up to the students to talk to us about what they need, and we can, open it up to a variety of topics, not just the job search, but all sorts of different things. That would be really, I think that would be valuable. All right. I think we got time for one more question if anybody would like to chime in here towards the end. If not, that's totally fine. I got a couple things I can bring up here.
I've got one question.
Go ahead, Michelle.
Oh,
okay. Thanks, Alexander. I have a
go for
LinkedIn
Michelle,
profile.
then Alex.
When would it be beneficial to add the fact that I'm taking this boot camp to my profile as a kind of preview for potential employers, in a few months?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I think it's a good habit to, at the earlier stages, to be active. A lot of students they'll create a LinkedIn in the beginning, and then they won't touch it until the job placement class is when you actually have to really improve it. So there's a lot of time in between there that it's just sitting kind of stagnant. So if you are actively adding what you're doing on there, that's a huge beneficial, because it shows your activity on LinkedIn and it gives you a heads up on the competition. So yeah, add your schooling on there, add the program, add the development and the skills that you're learning, keep it updated constantly, because that just is going to give you, you're going to be that much more familiar with LinkedIn by the time that you're really ready for the job search. And it's a huge tool for finding jobs. So I think
I'm already
absolutely
used to
add it on there. You can always change the education level as you go up,
Yeah, great.
For the LinkedIn, are we able to use you guys?
But yeah, it's not going to hurt you to add it on there at all.
Are we able to use you guys for endorsements at all, or how can we utilize the school for endorsements? Because that's something, especially if you're new into the field, you don't have any maybe old colleagues or work history, and that does kind of showcase, a really nicely showcases on the LinkedIn profile. So I was wondering if we're able to do that.
Oh, absolutely. There's instructors that you
absolutely.
that you work with and ask questions. And when the students, after you finish your live project, reach out to your live project instructor and then ask to see if they can endorse you and even give you recommendations. If you work with one of us, Forrest or myself, and we work with you during job placement, you can definitely use this as a resource as well.
Cool. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. I think we're getting towards the end here. I want to thank everybody for coming. I really hope this was a valuable experience for you. I think there's a ton more we can go over on the job search questions. So, we just kind of scratched the surface here. We're always available and we're dying to help you on any of these problems. So we encourage you to reach out to job placement. Obviously, if you're not at that point yet, you will be here eventually. And we're even actively trying to get in touch with our students before they get to the job placement, so they're that much more prepared. So reach out to us, reach out to your instructors. Don't hesitate. We're here to help you at all times. Tony, myself, Sam, Danny, the whole job placement team. We love to help you guys out. I appreciate everybody coming. I really hope this was great. We will see you. We have another Tech Talk on Friday, so hopefully we will see you then. Bye, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Tony. Thanks
Take care.
Forrest.
Thank you, everyone.